All right, Mia, we're here. Welcome to the Ex-Homeschoolers Club.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It is a pleasure to have you. Oh my gosh, it has been. We were talking before we hit record. It has been a number of years since I've seen you. You
hmm
for audience members who don't know, you are the younger sister of Derry, who was like
hmm
my third interview on this my third episode on this podcast, and like my best
hmm
friend growing up. And then your mom has also been on the podcast, and now I get to talk to you, and I'm so stoked because I we haven't talked in like a decade, so
hmm
I'm pumped to get your experience.
Yeah, it's super cool to be here. It's really cool to see the varied, very varied experiences from people. Where I'm like, I thought I had a pretty similar experience to certain people, but then I hear their point of view and I'm like, oh, we had an entirely different experience with this.
Yeah, no, that's been the coolest part about the show is like getting to chat with all of you and learning about all these like behind the scene things that were happening and how they
hmm
shape like whether you think of it as like good or bad or
hmm
like just overall your experience. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to you for a few minutes and kind of walk me
hmm
through like a day in the life of Mia Brooks growing up in the Brooks household of like what was a day in the life of homeschool looking like?
Well, I feel like for if you asked any of my other siblings, like each of us would have a very different telling of it, I think. Because most we're I think about each 2 or 3 years apart, so kind of
Mhm.
each of us had a different era of parenting.
Yeah.
Definitely my older siblings experiences were very different from mine. But our homeschooling was a little bit less structured than a lot of the people in our homeschooling community that I knew. I know a lot of kids had certain programs or a certain curriculum that they did everything from one. I know my mom talked about that a little bit already. Um, but we kind of switched between stuff a lot. And so my older siblings had certain curriculums that by the time it got to me where I was taking that subject, it was like we're not using that anymore.
Yeah.
um but it was very um self-paced. I think because I'm the youngest, I kind of got kind of the less structured, the we're almost done. We just got to finish with this last kid. Kind of a little
Yeah.
bit less structured stuff, which I think kind of worked to my advantage. I was very kind of just show me how to do something and I'm going to get it done so I can be done with it.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of that whole like mentality. I just interviewed someone earlier this week who was talking about they did a semester in high school back in like a private or public school, and
hmm
they were talking about how they were like it wasn't that the teaching was bad, but the waste of time. They're like, I could have done everything that I needed to do for the day in 2 to 3 hours. And so I felt
Yeah.
just like trapped in this space and I wanted to like go play sports and I wanted to go do other stuff. And I think that can be one of the strengths of homeschooling is that ability, right? To
hmm
kind of be like, I set my own pace.
Yeah.
So yeah, mom and dad hand over the textbooks and boom, I'm off to the races. Let's go.
I know that was a really crazy thing as a kid seeing my public school friends. It basically is like having a full-time job as a kid.
Yes.
It's really takes so much of your time for something that is so I don't know. I feel like learning really isn't something where you can be like, okay, we're gonna be in this building and learn for 8 hours. I'm like, I think most people, obviously, this is coming from me not having a great attention span, but I think for a lot of people, after a few hours, there's a certain cap where it's it's probably not beneficial that we're still trying to cram more information in our brains. Where it's just, I don't know, it's so crazy seeing that because I was so opposite from what I had.
No, I 100% agree with you. It's one of those things that's interesting, even like working for myself, because it's like homeschool in a lot of ways, where like I get to
Mm,
set the hours. There's good and bads to it, where it's like I set the hours for like what when I get to do stuff and when I work on projects and whatever. But I can if I'm feeling motivated to do it at midnight, I'll do it at midnight. Um,
mhm,
but yeah, but we hit that slump like you were talking about that like kind of like you look at something for so long and then you're just like I even if your brain is like I don't want to say wired normally, but like
mhm.
that like if you don't have a neurodivergent brain, you
Yeah.
you still after a couple hours are like, I'm burning out of this thing,
Yeah.
I need like a break kind of a thing.
Mhm.
So I do want to kind of touch on, because like you obviously like thrived to some degree, like having that unstructured feeling, work at my own pace, because by 14 you were already like going to college level classes and doing that. So talk to me about that, and talk to me about like how that kind of came to be, of like, okay, like mom and dad are ready to not ship me off to college, but like I'm going to community college, I'm going to start taking higher level education classes. Like, what did that look like?
Well, a few of my older siblings had done some. They didn't do as much, like while they were still in high school, but all of my siblings had gone to VC. Um, and so I already knew of people doing it. I'm like trying to remember now if it was even my like it wasn't really my mom. She didn't really have that as the plan for me to do that. I think it just kind of came about that I happened to. The first class I took was like one of the combined classes where it was like 2 semesters in one. So it was like a
Hmm.
longer class, and I think it was like 3 days a week or something. Um, but it was, I think, Algebra 1 and Algebra 2
Okay.
together. And at the time, which of course they change all the requirements of stuff at community college as soon as you leave. So like now it's not a prerequisite, but back then it was a prerequisite. Like you had to take it no matter what if you were going to take any other advanced math. So Callie was taking it at the time for her, like, she was already out of high school. She was like actually doing it
Right.
for her college degree. Um, and that was like about the time I would have been taking Algebra 1 and 2 anyways. So I did that class with her, and that was a semester. And it definitely was very, I don't know, it definitely was hard because it was an advanced class. It was definitely helpful being in the class with a sibling. But honestly, my reaction at the time going into community college was just like everyone was so immature, where I was like, this is like not serious at all. Like the teachers at in my classes took stuff way less seriously than like some of the teachers at group solutions did. Who like most
Okay.
most of them
Yeah.
weren't even actual teachers. Like
Right.
there there was I don't know, it was interesting because I had obviously had like the social dynamics of a classroom before, but only with other homeschoolers,
Right.
which like
We're a bunch of weirdos. We're,
yeah, to a certain degree it is a lot of strange people. So like you kind of don't have to be you're not as aware of being different or being weird or anything when you are used to being around a lot of weird people. But it was definitely very interesting. I thought I was going to feel very like young and like be able to kind of not keep up or that, but I really had like the opposite experience where I was like a lot of these college age students that I'm interacting with are like really not even in the same phase of life as me when they're like full adults already.
the college thing is so interesting, because I didn't ever do classes at VC. I just immediately went to college, like 4 year
Mhm.
university, and so it was interesting. But my sister did community college and things like that, and so but it was interesting to compare notes with her on like the difference in the way classrooms are run, because like 4 year universities tend, or at least the one I went to, everyone who was in the classroom was like 18 to 22-ish. There was a
Mhm.
few master's students who would have been older. There was a few people who were coming back and getting their degrees as like 30-year-old adults
Mhm.
and things like that. But for the majority of the students, it was all like that 18 to 22 year range. Um, and then my sister would talk about going to college, and she would be like, "Oh yeah, we've got people from the age of 16 all the way into like their 50s."
Mhm.
Because community college, obviously, it's a lot more accessible to more people.
Yeah.
But even for someone who like like she would work with people in their 50s, but right, who were like, I never got a degree, it's just something I've always wanted to do, I'm going back and
Mhm.
getting it now, right? And so you've
Mhm.
got that weird, it is a very wide mix of people
Yeah.
who are on all different walks of life. But to your point, you kind of are all in the same place to some degree, because you're like, I gotta do algebra one, or
Mhm.
whatever this class is, like I need this information to get
Mhm.
the next step in my career. um it's just it's so wild to me how community college operates, and like looking at it,
Mhm.
and like especially you being 14, being in the classroom. If I was 18 going to, I'd be like, what, this kid is a genius.
I know, I think at the time I really I know it's, definitely a common experience for a lot of, like, neurodivergent kids where you kind of feel older than you are at a
Mhm.
young age because you're kind of sensing the differences in yourself. But really, it's not necessarily a sign of maturity because I really don't think I was much more mature than my peers. I think maybe I just had a certain understanding of being different from people, and usually that doesn't come till you're older, I guess. I don't know. Um, but like I look back and I remember at the time being like, yeah, these guys sitting next to me probably think that I'm 18 and I'm the same age as them. But then
Right.
I look at pictures of myself when I was 14 and I was like, oh my word. Like I was a little kid, very obviously. And I'm very grateful that like for the most part people did like notice that I was young and they like didn't talk to me because they didn't want to seem weird, which honestly I was
Right.
grateful for. But there was, there was other high school students too.
So did you do VC classes all through, I guess, I mean 14 to 18 would be your high school years, but were you doing VC classes that whole entire time?
Yeah, I started with just the one. The first semester I just did that one. And then the next year I did maybe like one or two, but then like the last 2 years of high school, I pretty much was only doing VC because it
Oh,
was counting for my like towards my high school diploma and towards like my associates at the same
right.
time. So I pretty much was only, and at that point I was the youngest kid. So it was kind of
Mhm.
like all of my other siblings were already graduated. My mom, like, I don't know, it just seems kind of like I'm already doing classes. I might as well just finish. So I
Yeah.
did, yeah, the last 2 years I basically was mainly doing that. Um, and I took like about like 3 classes a semester, I think. And then I ended up only having one more semester after I graduated to finish my associates.
Okay. Well, that's kind of nice. Done
Mm.
it like 18, 19 years old. That's like kind of nice. Did you have the associate's degrees are kind of a an enigma to me to some degree,
Mhm.
because like obviously like with a bachelor's, like you have a very, you have an, I have a bachelor's, I have a bachelor of science in music and music business, which,
Mhm.
so I tell people I have a BS degree. Um, but like, is our AA degrees kind of similar where you set an emphasis of like, hey, I'm focusing on this area, or are they more, I don't want to say generic, but like I know a lot of people use them to then go on to do like
Yeah,
a
yeah,
four
yeah.
year, a bachelor's degree program.
Mhm. Mine, so it's kind of either. It's just kind of whatever what you want. um,
Okay.
like you totally can do like a specific major where you are mainly doing classes in that, and then that's like your major, and your degree will actually mean something kind of. Mine is just Associates of Arts and Science or Arts and Humanities, which basically just
Okay.
means I have no clue why it's called that because I took 2 art classes in the entire time. And it was because I was interested in it, not even because I necessarily had to take them. And I don't think I took a single humanities class. So I'm not sure why it's called that. But yeah, Associates of Arts and Humanities. It basically was just all of the classes that I needed to graduate high school. And it's like all of the general ed that you need to like do any degree basically. So I have
Right.
like my AAT, which is like the associates and the stuff that you need to be able to transfer to a 4 year, which I never did, but I have it.
Yeah. It's ready. It's
Yeah.
locked and loaded if you
Mhm.
choose to go that path, which is kind of nice.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's so interesting because in high school, I want to say I was 14 or whatever, where I first started to learn about like the dual credit kind of thing, like you're talking about, right? It's like it
Mm.
counts for high school, but it also can go count towards your college, which like made a lot of sense to me because I'm like, why take a class twice if I can only take it once and be done
Right.
with it, kind of a deal. But I never, like I said, I never took community college classes. But I tested out of a lot of stuff, and so I did
Mhm.
CLEP exams, and that was super helpful when I got to college because I ended up only needing to do 3 years of college because
Mm.
I was like I did a couple club exams. I worked all through the summer on school stuff. Like I was just like I as soon as I got there, I was like I want out of this. I don't want school.
Right.
I thrive in that environment, but I also was just like I don't want to do this anymore. Like I
Mhm.
want a job. I want to like go make money, that kind of a thing. But
Mhm.
um yeah. So anyway, not to harp too much on me because the show is not about me, it's about you. um but so okay, so so you graduate, you're 18-ish, 18, 19.
I
You've
actually
got both your
was sorry. I graduated a year early technically for my like
okay,
age.
okay,
I skipped a grade at some point. I don't know what grade it was, but it was like somewhere in the like second, third grade, I think. And I just like whatever the testing was at the time that you like could do to test out of a grade or, skip a grade or whatever.
yeah.
I skipped a grade. So I was a year younger than like the class that I was in. So I was 16 and a half
Oh
or
my gosh, yeah.
yeah, I was almost 17 when I graduated. Or I turned 17 right after I graduated. And then
Okay,
I had the one semester after. So I really was only almost 18 when I was done
dang,
with high school and college.
yeah. So at that point, I mean, okay, so you're 17, you're kind of like you said, you're kind of done.
Mm.
What is going through your brain of like, were you thinking about, okay, now I want to go do a bigger degree, or I want to get a job, or I want to like pursue creative passion? Like what was that? What was going through your brain at that point?
Man, I don't know. I think for a lot of my schooling, like both in college and homeschooling, I was always very aware of like I got to choose the thing that I want to do for the rest of my life. And I never really like had a specific thing that was very job related that I was interested in.
Right.
I'd always been interested in music. But even at that point I still was like I had done some stuff with music but hadn't really like I didn't unlock it in my brain as thinking it was like a real option, I guess, at the time.
Yeah.
So I think I was pretty confused, honestly. Um, and also like having the experience of only being homeschooled and then going to college where it was just such a like big difference. I kind of was like experiencing what most kids experience from a super young age for the first time as
Right.
like almost an adult. Um, so I think it was like I don't know. Something I was thinking about a lot recently is like I always felt like I was very ahead as a kid. And I think it's almost like kind of the mindset that a lot of homeschoolers have, almost like a little God complex of like, we're so much better than the public schoolers. We're going to be so ahead so we can do all these things and blah, blah, blah. Where it's like, which, is great because you should be proud of yourself. But I think I didn't have a very accurate picture of the world because I really hadn't existed in society as it actually is. And it's very interesting because all of the things that I really value about homeschooling, like, kind of are the things that made me unprepared, which is like having a lot of flexibility and a lot of time to be able to figure things out yourself and, you know, so much stuff of like what I think life should be, but isn't really realistic to how the world is set up. And yeah, It's just kind of crazy. I always felt very ahead, but now as an adult, or really at the time when I was like turning 18, I kind of was like first existing actually, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it
I
was
feel
kind
that.
of like the first time I had to actually gauge what I would want out of a job or a career, all of that.
I think you make a great point there of like that kind of it it's like a bubble. It's like growing up in a bubble, whether our parents
Hmm.
intended that or not, right?
Yeah.
I had a friend on, Adam Gauss. He was on the show. Him and I went to college together. He was also
Hmm.
homeschooled, and him and I talked about the Christian bubble existing, where like youth group was a big role in our lives. I know your family, my family, we all went to the same church
Hmm.
at one point, like, and so church was big. And then like him and I chose a college that was a continuation of that bubble,
Hmm.
and while we were in that bubble, it started to burst, and we started to see the real world. But it wasn't even until we got out of it. So we're 20. I graduated at 20, but like 21 ish,
Hmm.
that bubble is like bursting for us, where we're like, to your point, starting to see the world as like, oh, there's like so much else out here. There's like the differing of opinions, and the like,
Right.
this is how jobs operate, and this is, all these things that we maybe had some preparation for, but it was a shaking. And I think, I don't know that that's exclusively like a homeschool thing, where like
Hmm.
we get out in the world, and like, I don't know, maybe public school kids feel that way too. But
Hmm.
it is such a dramatic shift to go from like that unstructured structure, in a way, like this is how
Yeah.
the world operates inside of that bubble, to like, oh wow, the world is just so vastly different than what I anticipated. And
Hmm.
I don't know if parents can even prepare you for
Yeah,
that.
right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's kind of like, do you want to shelter your kid by teaching them these like good principles and then later they have to have that earth shattered? Or do you want to shatter their earth when they're young and potentially traumatize them more? It's like, I don't know. There's like, it's such a
Yeah,
balance. And I'm
it's
like,
weird.
that's why I didn't.
Yeah, that's such a weird thing to think about, of like, how do you balance that as a parent? Like, not even just a homeschool parent, but like, how do you
Yeah.
balance that as a parent, of like giving your kids the exposure to the outside world, and how it operates and how it looks, and like,
Hmm.
some people would argue like the world is a cruel place, right? And it's, there's all this stuff, and it's like, it's, I don't know, like, it's man, you put me in a thinker there. For sure. I do want to kind of like bounce to something else that you had brought up in like us chatting before the interview, and that was, and you even brought it, you had alluded to it a few times while we've been chatting too, is like being neurodivergent, and
Mm.
so your brain being just wired differently than others. And when did that kind of start to play? I mean, that's probably played a role in your life, your entire life, but like, when
Mm.
did that really start to be like, okay, like something is different about me, more than just like I was raised a homeschool kid?
So I honestly had never thought about ADHD as like something that could pertain to me at all. Like I really didn't know anything
Oh,
about it growing up.
mm-hmm.
Um, Also, it's like a very interesting subset of people. The homeschoolers, not all of them, but a lot of the homeschoolers I was raised around were very homeopathic to the point where it was kind of in denial of like mental health and differences
Yep.
existing. So there were a lot of like, I grew up with a lot of autistic kids who were not diagnosed, or they were diagnosed, but their parents were in denial or trying to cure them somehow, or, so I really didn't have any exposure to knowing what it was. Um, so I basically, how I found out, um, I started seeing this therapist in, I think, 2021, and I was seeing her for about a year. And it was honestly after like almost an entire year of going to her. She was like, "Okay, I'm just going to say this, and I just want you to like hear me non-judgmentally. I'm not saying anything negative about you, but like from what I have witnessed, basically being your therapist, you seem to have like a lot of these traits. Um, and it would make a lot of sense if that were the case. And I'm not diagnosing you or saying that, but if you're interested in that, we could talk about it and you can get tested or whatever. Um, and so we talked about it a lot, and it was pretty not earth shattering in a bad way, but pretty like, just, it was something where I had never even thought about it. But then once I thought about it and she kind of described it to me how I was appearing, I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Um, so then I ended up doing like the official testing, and I got diagnosed. Um, but yeah, it definitely was like very, very eye opening for me. Um, because there was just so many things that I was like, how did I not see that this was like obviously something was different? I guess I definitely like felt that I was different from a young age. Um, but especially like as a girl, it's very common for people to kind of just see any kind of like bad behavior or differences as just like because you're a girl and you're emotional, or because you're a kid even, um, where it's just not taken very seriously, which, to a certain degree, it's like kids are going to be all over the place. But there
Right.
really was a lot that once I got diagnosed, I was like, okay, this was pretty obvious.
Well, it's as someone who grew up with a neurodivergent person, it was so interesting because, like, I think my mom realized pretty early on, like, my kids operate differently,
Mm-hmm.
and like I could read a book and just retain all of the information, and my
Mm-hmm.
sister, that was not the way she learned, and my mom was very confused by that because my mom and I we're very similar in the way we think and the way we act, and just
Mm-hmm.
the way our brains work is very, very similar, and the way my dad and my sister operate, they're very similar, and so we started to piece together these puzzle pieces of like, okay, like, my sister can't remember something unless like she's doing jumping jacks, and you tell her and then it's locked in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm thankful that my parents like were like, okay, we're gonna like do testing, we're gonna figure out what's the learning difference here, what are we doing
Mm-hmm.
wrong, how do we get, because my mom was very dedicated to like, I want my kids to have the best. I think most parents are. Like, to your point, I think some of them exist in denial over certain things, but um, it was a challenge. It was like an interesting kind of like puzzle to work out and grow up with somebody like that, because there's so much, and everybody is uniquely different, right? Of like my sister has to jump on a trampoline in order to like retain information in a certain
Mm-hmm.
way. That's not everybody who's neurodivergent. That's just her. That's the way her
Mm-hmm.
brain operates.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can imagine like getting diagnosed as an adult, like, and starting to realize that, and especially you brought up too the like the stigma around like that either not being, you know, true, or it's, hey, it's just like a kid thing, she'll grow out of it,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Like that also plays kind of a role in that, like, how do you approach the next steps of like, okay, now I have this information, what do I do with this now?
Mm-hmm.
Now that you know, right? Now that you
Mm-hmm.
have an understanding of how your brain operates, like what did educating yourself about it, like, how did that look for you? Like, what, I don't know, did you dive into books, what, podcasts, videos, like, how did you
Um,
learn? Because I don't want to call them coping mechanisms, but I
mm-hmm.
know that that's like something that you kind of have to figure out how to work in life. And did you see like, oh, I'm already kind of doing these things to operate on this level, like I'm already
Mm-hmm.
implementing things? I don't know, there's a lot in that question there, so I don't want to overwhelm you, but
Yeah, no, I think honestly the biggest thing has just been like a lot of reflection and seeing kind of being able to like think about a memory and seeing it through a whole different lens now, where you're like
Mhm.
understanding behaviors. I was always very emotional as a kid. Like my entire life, I've always been like what other people I think would describe as dramatic, and definitely my siblings did describe as dramatic. We had this home video of I'm like 2 years old or three or something, and Derry is like recording. My mom is not even in the house. She was tiling like this. There's like a little bit of floor in our garage, and she was tiling it or something. I don't know. My brother was recording, and I'm like with my head in the cabinet in the like sitting on the counter like trying to hide, and I'm just like screaming into the cabinet because Derry is singing to the tune of like "We Will Rock You" by Queen, just
Mhm.
Mia's cranky over and over, and like which is just like classic tormenting your siblings. But um I definitely was very emotional and dramatic as a child, where I didn't I like really never understood why, because I could see that my emotions were a lot more intense
Mhm.
than the people around me would be in the same situation. Um, but it was so confusing because a lot of the time it was like very short lived, kind of. Like I had a lot of big emotions, but I could get over it pretty
Right.
quickly and
Very
then be
flash
fine
in the
again.
pan. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so it definitely just put a lot of things in perspective where I was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Um, honestly have not read too much. I have like a long list of books I want to read. Um, but honestly, just a lot of like internet stuff. Honestly,
Yeah.
YouTubers and just random people online. Um, and then also, I'm like seeing a different therapist now because this was a few years back. But also like definitely therapy and kind of being able to have someone who has a similar, well, who has the same, my therapist also has ADHD. So, kind of, having a sounding board who understands not just like that you're struggling, but understands how it feels.
I agree with you that it's important to find those people who have that same thing because I think some of the stigma around neurodivergency, ADHD, dyslexia, like all of the autism, right? It's like all of that stuff kind of I think tends to get lumped together, unfortunately. Um, and like I think a lot of the stigma around it is that like the people who are in the families with those people, they don't understand it and they don't take the time to understand it. And
Mm-hmm.
then so that person is an outsider and then they just kind of continue to be an outsider. But it's like once you start to put people who are the same around each other, like they realize like, oh, I'm not so different after all, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
I am different, but like somebody else gets it, right? Somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
because the way you maybe describe the world to me probably won't make sense to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
It just is like the way my sister describes the way she like visualizes learning is like it makes no sense to me. It's a completely different language.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what's cool is like when you can find those people, like I said, those people that are like in the same boat as you, they can give you the tools, the tips, the whatever, so you guys can learn to like operate. And then for those people who don't have it, I think it really comes down to learning how to be patient and also learning to try to understand as best as you can. We will never fully understand, but for
Mm-hmm.
those of us who are not, patience has been the number one thing that is very hard for me. But like I exist around a lot of people who think very differently than me, and so just being able to take a breath and be like, okay, let me just ask questions. And when we're hitting walls and we can't like, I don't know, I don't know if you've ever had this experience of like you feel like you're talking past somebody. Like, does that make sense? What I'm saying of just that like I'm saying something to you and you're like your brain can't comprehend it, but your response to it, my brain can't comprehend it, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
what I what I've learned is like I'm like I have to take a breath and I have to rethink instead of just asking the same question over and over. I have to
Mhm.
rethink the way I'm asking the question and be like, okay, let's just like, can we refocus this on a different topic or whatever? And we'll get
Mhm.
there eventually. But that's a whole thing in and of itself. Definitely probably not as stressful as being neurodivergent. But um, how did like you've obviously learned I hate using the word cope, but like you've learned to operate inside of that and like
No, it is
know
coping.
how to okay.
It is
I don't know
coping.
why. I think I view coping as like such a negative word and maybe I should rethink that and maybe it's not a negative word in a lot of instances, but like how have you changed now that you like okay, I've got this information about myself. I'm learning these tools. I know how to cope with it now. Like how has that changed you as a person? Has it made you more self-assured and like confident in yourself or I don't know, has anything changed for you?
It's and it's interesting. There's a lot of things that I've kind of like learned to like accommodate myself, but I already knew how to do them. I just hadn't like made the connection in my brain that there was a reason I was like doing those things. So there's like
Yeah.
a lot of different things going on in my brain. I don't know. There's a lot of different I have a lot of different like sensory things that bother me, and I've like known my entire life that they bothered me, but I
Hmm.
didn't like I just couldn't connect that it was because of something. So I kind of was viewing it beforehand as like, oh, this thing bothers me so much, why can't it just not bother me? And now I'm like, oh, this thing bothers me because of this, like this reason, like this is the reason this is bothering me. So I'm just gonna
Right.
like not do it or like, find a different way to do things. Um, like I think one of the things that was kind of hard for me as a kid with homeschooling before I like was doing like before high school, so more like elementary school, was I think I appeared really like I was doing really well and definitely like an overachiever, um, like to my family and to like the people in our community, um, where I definitely like took the flexibility to my advantage where I would like work really ahead in a subject or something so that I could not have to do math the next day or like that sort of thing where I would kind of just like cram all of my focus into this much time so that I could not have to focus on anything for a long time. And I think it kind of like my parents view that as like, oh, she's so efficient. She's like so good at doing her school, blah, blah, blah. But really, it was like because I had such a poor attention span, it was like I cannot think about doing math for the next 3 days. So I'm going to do it all today so that I don't have to do it the next 2 days. Where it was like I was a I was making it work and it did, but I think I really experienced a lot of burnout once I was an adult and I realized like I really wasn't flourishing. I was just working way harder. And
Yeah.
something I am on a medication now, but like about a year to year and a half ago, when I was like in the process of trying to get on medication, I met with this psychiatrist before the previous one that I am like working with now. Um, because you can't like just get medication from a therapist. You have to like actually do a whole, the
Right.
law and stuff, whatever. I met with this guy and it was not a good experience. Um, but he like was asking me about my schooling and he was like, "So you had like I had like a 3.85 GPA or something for high school." Um, and he was like, this was when I was already diagnosed, by the way. He was like, "So, how do you have ADHD then? If you had a 3.8?" And I was like,
Right.
the thing I realized is like I really was not performing at that high of a level because I'm like it's so effortless and so easy for me. It's because I was like working twice as hard as a lot of the
Right.
people around me, or at least from my perception, how hard it seemed like they were working. Um, So like I did really well in school, but it really was not. It was enjoyable for me in a lot of ways, but it was very stressful.
Yeah.
And so honestly just now seeing like I think I'm kind of at the point where I'm getting past the burnout now, but I definitely was
Yeah.
very burnt out after graduating and finishing college and kind of just being like I think there was a certain expectation to overachieve as a homeschooler. And I kind of had, a little bit what I was saying earlier already, but kind of like, oh, I really didn't overachieve that much. If now all the effort it took for me to like get to this point, now I don't have energy to like go to a 4 year college and get a like high paying job or something like that. Where a lot of my peers who had a very similar path as me did that.
The way you framed that is really interesting because like the whole idea of like cramming everything really quickly to be like, okay, I just need this to be done so that I don't have to think about it because you just knew that that's how my brain operates. I just need this to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I'm going to be thinking about it or I can't perform at the level I need to or whatever. Also, like, you
Mm-hmm.
have that expectation in your brain of like, I need to be smarter. I need to be whatever. It's kind of interesting because yeah, that does lead to the burnout. I know that feeling as an
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneur. I know that feeling very, very well. I'm coming out of that season myself, of just that, like, it's too much. I'm just like, I lit the candle at both ends, right? And now I'm just
Mm-hmm.
done. And that's a hard thing to come back from, and it could take a long time, take years sometimes for
Yeah.
people to come back from that. But as you've now started to like unpack, oh, this is how I was thinking. Are you able to communicate that now to like your family and your friends a lot better of like, hey, like this is why I am the way I am, and like it, I'm trying to think what my question is here, but like get them to an understanding point of like, hey, like when you see this, these are maybe signs that like I'm not doing so hot, or I am thriving, right? You see me
Mm-hmm.
act like this, like I'm doing really well, right? And like,
Mm-hmm.
um, but has it become easier to kind of, I don't know, educate people, I guess, in your life?
It's a good question. I think in a small way, yes. I like have obviously talked to my family about it. I actually like full through the full process of getting diagnosed, I didn't tell my parents that I was doing it or any of my family that I was doing it at first. Just cuz I kind of was like, what if I do all the testing and then they're like you don't have ADHD and then I'm like all embarrassed.
Right? You're like, yeah,
So I didn't tell them at first, but no, once I did get diagnosed, I um talked to them about it. And I think I'm still learning how to communicate a lot of that. It's kind of an interesting experience. Like this kind of relates to how I feel about homeschooling as well. I feel like as a kid, I was able to do a really good job without the structure, but it like wasn't because I didn't need structure. And it was kind of like a self-protection thing of like, oh, okay, I have to get this done myself. So I'm going to learn how to do that. Like, but it wasn't necessarily like a healthy way for me to be pushing myself, I guess. And so, kind of with the same way that I relate to like my difficulties, like, I kind of had to, for a long time, learn how to take care of myself and learn how to like try and thrive even though there was all of these things that felt like they were holding me back. So kind of now I'm at the point where I'm like, okay, I can see what these things are. Um it's like quite a process to get out of the mindset of like this is a part of me and I can like accept that and expect people to be understanding about it. I feel
hmm
like I kind of have had a mindset for a long time of like shame about having struggles. And
yeah,
I think that's like a pretty common experience of a lot of kids raised in, honestly, just in general, like evangelical circles, is just kind of having like a lot of shame for the things that you struggle with, regardless of if it's related to like a disability or just like anything, where you kind of just like it takes a while to get to the point from like realizing that there's these things about yourself that and you can feel okay about it and actually getting to the point where you're like I can expect other people to be okay with it too, you know?
You are preaching to the choir. Shame is a very powerful thing inside of like the evangelical circles. Big, very powerful thing inside of like our homeschool community as well,
Hmm.
because that was very religious as well. And yeah, it's hey, like I'm in the same boat as you. I'm 28. I'm still dealing with like shame and
Hmm.
shit that like has been bubbling under the surface. So I definitely I feel you on that, and it's a it's an interesting one to kind of like work through that process of like I don't this is who I am. This is me as a person, right? And
Hmm.
like there's no shame in that. I am who I
Hmm.
am. I think as we I like to ask people a little bit about like their homeschool experience like, you know, I don't want to say good bad like but like based on your homeschool experience, when people come to you, if people come to you and they're like, "Hey, like I'm thinking about homeschooling my kids." Right? What do you tell them or what do you encourage people to kind of like look at and go, okay, like these are maybe the good things. Here's the bad shit that like we got to address this over here and like focus in on this a little bit because like, you know, um, I don't know. I'm trying to think what my question is here, but like when people come to you and they're asking you about, I want to homeschool my kids. What are you telling them? Are you telling them gay, nay, think about these things? What are you thinking?
Honestly, I think the biggest thing I would think in the first place is just like what are your intentions? Like what is the reasoning? Like what's the reasoning behind wanting to? Because I think
Hmm.
there's a lot of overlap with homeschoolers and like sometimes the parents' intentions are like, I don't want my kid to learn that gay people exist, so I'm gonna
Right.
homeschool them so that they don't learn about it at public school. Um, and I feel like if you're coming from a place of like wanting to shelter your kid from finding things out, it's not gonna work because they're just gonna find out anyways, or they're gonna find out
Yeah.
later. I don't know. I think I would just say it could be a really great thing, and I really, really like it in the sense of I don't think any kid really should be at school for that long. But the
Hmm.
way our society is set up, it basically forces parents to send their kids to school. Um, like I was very lucky to be able to be homeschooled because my mom, like my parents could afford my mom staying home
Yeah.
and just my dad working. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of kids, especially now, um, that like their parents can't afford one of the parents to stay home. Um, so like in a perfect world, I do think it is a great option. I would just say like accept help from other people. Don't try to be
Yeah.
like the sole source of education for your kids. So I feel like doing like a lot of community stuff and being in like co-ops and that kind of stuff is definitely a good thing. And also just like letting your kids, trying to get them some normal experiences in there, and make sure
Yeah.
they're socializing and, all that.
I like what you said about intentions. I think the intentions are everything. I've said on this podcast before, like in my opinion, religion is not a good enough intention to homeschool your kid.
Yeah.
And and you said it too. The sheltering is not protecting my kid from this, that, and the other. They're gonna learn about it eventually, right? And
Yeah.
so it's like, you know, I would rather see parents take a role in like I want to help. I think parents should play a role in like what their kids learn and things like that. But I think you can do it in a controlled environment where you are able to address it, have open communication about those things in a safe environment, in an at-home environment, and expose them to whether it's LGBT or whether it's uh, whether it's like learning about ADHD and dyslexia
Mhm.
and autism and things like that, or or other world religions, whatever it is. Like,
Mhm.
you can still have control over that, but it's definitely like it's a necessary thing for people to learn because they're gonna learn it eventually.
Mhm.
Um, to your point, so with that, I guess we haven't touched on this yet, but like, what are you doing now? Right? Like, I know I see your music stuff pop up for me,
Mhm.
but like, what are you doing now? What are you pursuing? What are you enjoying? Like, if you've got music out that you want to share with the audience, like, I'd love to push people that way.
Yeah, I'm just working and kind of trying to make the music stuff take off to be able to hopefully do that, and actually make some money from it. Um,
Hey,
yeah, I
that's the
put
hardest part.
out, right, I know. I recorded and like produced or well, not just me, I produced it with this guy Derek Ted. Um, an album last year and then I put it out in November of last year. And yeah, I've been kind of like this is kind of like the after period of like kind of taking a break a little bit, but I've been writing a lot and hopefully we'll be releasing new stuff soon. But yeah, if people want to check it out,
Sweet.
it's Baby with an I, Babi, Manatee on wherever you want to listen to music. Or just Instagram if you don't want to listen and you just want to stalk me.
Hey, you got any? I don't know. Like, are you doing live shows at all, or like, do you have anything on the books for those folks who maybe are in Ventura County want to
Mhm.
come support?
I don't have anything planned right now, but
Okay.
hopefully soon. And if you're interested, just look at my Instagram. Hopefully it will be
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, I've listened to a couple of your songs and they're amazing. I
Well, thank
love
you.
them. They sound great. Yeah, for people like, what kind of, is there a particular style you go for, or is there like, um, or are you flexible? I know some artists are like, I'm pretty locked into like I do this, where other people are like, no, it's like anything that comes out of my brain, let's make it. It could be anything from rap to hard rock to country
Uh,
music to whatever.
I feel like I always just tell people that I make like indie music because I feel like at this point that kind of just encapsulates like anything that is not too rock, but not too
Hmm.
folk. I don't know.
Okay.
Um,
It's that mix. It's that healthy mix in
yeah, it's a
between.
mix of stuff. Yeah, and we'll see. I don't think like I'm sure the music I will be making this year will be different from what I have out, and
Yeah.
hopefully that will keep continuing forever.
Hey, no, keep at it. I think the creativity thing is, eh, it's so important. I lost my creativity for a while and I'm getting it back, and like, it's so much fun to watch people like make stuff, and
Hmm.
like, and that's why I tell people like, put it out. You just like put it out to the world, cuz like, you don't know who it's going to resonate with. It might
Yeah.
resonate with nobody. This podcast is an example of that. When I started this, I was like, I'm going to have 10 people listen to this thing. And here we are, and like, thousands of people have listened to this podcast at this point.
Hmm.
And that's like, it blows my mind sometimes how like, when you do the creative act and you actually have some kind of like passion behind it and it's evident in your creativity, people will show up for it.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I don't know. It's just, I
Totally.
don't know. It's fun.
No, I really resonate with that. Don't let like the embarrassment stop you from stuff because there's lots of even like some of the older music I have released, I'm like embarrassed of and I cringe a little bit at it, but there's people who like have messaged me and they're like, I love this song so much. It like makes me feel so seen. Where it's like, even if it's something that you're not gonna like look at and be like, that represents me currently, it's like it's gonna resonate with someone. And yeah, that's the
Yeah.
same thing you're doing with podcasts and everything.
Yeah. It's a process too. And I think what's cool is like, hopefully, um, in a decade from now, we can look back and we can go, like, we can look at the first song or the first podcast we put out, right? And we can go
Mhm.
and we can cringe a little about it because we're just like,
Mhm.
but you've learned so much. So to go
Mhm.
from that to whatever you're then currently putting out at even a year later, 2 years later, 10 years
Mhm.
later, right? Like you look at it and you go, oh my gosh, like I've gotten so much better. And I
Yeah.
think that's the great thing about the creative journey is that like it's just that. And when you document it, you have the entire journey that you can share with
Right.
people. I went from this and not knowing how to do this to like, look at me now, you know,
Mhm.
it's a
Yeah, and it's like
very,
a time capsule of
exactly.
where you
Uh,
were at that point, regardless of if it's good or bad.
yeah, exactly. It could get worse. Who knows?
Yeah. True. It could always be
But
worse.
it could always be worse, yeah. But Mia, I really do. I appreciate you coming on the show. This has been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun
Yeah, it was
catching
really
up,
fun.
getting to know you as the person you are today, and not,
Mhm.
I knew you as a kid. I knew
A
you
seven-year-old.
as a little kid, and yeah, exactly. Um, and so it's fun to like actually like see who you are today and get to know that person and that version of you. And so thank you for coming on and sharing your story and being vulnerable with us. It's awesome. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. It was really fun.
And for all the listeners, like we said, go stream, listen to Mia's album, follow her on Instagram, do all the things. All that's going to be in the show notes below. And if you made it this far, leave a like, leave a subscribe, do all of the things that make the algorithm happy. We appreciate it. And go get on my newsletter and I'm just gonna keep pushing that because that's the place to be right now. So newsletter link is in the description. Sign up. It's free. It costs you nothing. And yeah, until next week. All right. Peace.